All right, what's happening, fam? L.A.R. movement still moving. Book is entitled Lessons from a Non-Custodial Father at Amazon, Kindle, and Create Space. Link will be in the description box below as usual. Go get it. PayPal link there also. They asked me to put it up, so I put it up. Thanks everybody for supporting. But this video is entitled Parenting with Prejudices. I'm going to touch on a bunch of different things, right? Sometimes people are parenting and raising kids with their own prejudices, and sometimes families parent the same way using prejudices, right? What I mean by that is, you might prefer one kid over the other, right? You might feel like this kid is going to be successful and this kid is not going to be as successful, so you may lean to the kid who's going to be successful, so you parent to give them all the opportunities to make them successful, and you kind of halfway do it with the kid that you think is not going to be as successful. Or you could do it vice versa, where that kid is going to be successful, so I'm going to just let them be a latchkey kid and they're going to always figure it out. So I'll halfway do it with them. But this other kid, they're going to need a whole lot of help. So I'm going to, invest completely into them. And you basically parenting with prejudices, right? So at some point, somebody's getting the short end of the stick compared to another person. Now, this also goes with the family dynamic. Um, you know, you see, being those kids where you look like a parent that the other parent doesn't like, so they have a kind of prejudiced way of parenting you, or you have some of their ways, so you have a a, a mean way of parenting them because they remind you of a person you don't like anymore, or they can remind you of yourself, and or another family member can remind you of yourself, and your connection with that's how I see myself in them, so I'm going to gravitate more to them than I do my own, right? Or I gravitate to one kid that reminds me of me more than the kid that reminds me of someone else. So you parent with a prejudice, you know. Same thing goes on with looks and attraction, right? This kid maybe may look better than this kid, so in some ways they treat the one kid that looks better, better than the kid that doesn't. Same thing with color. Sometimes people talk about, the darker family members get treated worse than the lighter family members. It happens because people parent with their own prejudices. Sometimes they're conscious and sometimes they're subconscious, but they definitely exist. Sometimes, there's a prejudice as far as family. You might respect the family that has more money over the family that has less money, or the family that has more influence or access than the family that doesn't. And you might facilitate one group having more influence and one group having more access than another because you're parenting with a prejudice. You want it a certain way, and this is a unilateral decision that's made where you make a choice, but you might not want to actually be responsible for the consequences that come down the line. Because people do this all the time. It could same thing with gender. You might have it feel like life is going to be easier on the boys or easier on the girls, so you make it easier on the boys or easier on the girls, or you may not like the opposite sex, so you might make it harder on the boys or harder on the girls. Your style of parenting is basically built in your disdain, whether it's implied or it's really how you feel, Your parenting is based on your disdain for whatever it is that you dislike. So there's a prejudice there, you know. And a lot of times, I think as people get older, this comes out. Part of sibling rivalry, part of like the black sheep of the family, part of the connection that people have with their family, whether they have a good foundation with their parents, or that bridge is burned, may stem from something in that area, and people don't think about it, like, because what winds up happening, if you're a kid and you're just an only child, you might not see it until you see the reaction with other kids in the same scenario. And, you know, parenting may seem to be more intense with an actual parent, an actual child, than it is with a parent and other people's kids. So in some ways, kids look at the situation a little differently, because how come you don't treat me like them? And it's like, well, I can give them back. I can't give you back, right? But when you go beyond that, it's always something a little bit deeper. Sometimes there's a prejudice, or necessarily for your mindset. You know, some parents try to break their children so they don't believe in themselves, because they don't want their kids to surpass them. And they may see greatness in them, in their children, that they don't see in themselves. And, you know, or it could be the reverse. They see greatness in their kid, and they just say, you know, I'm going to invest in this kid, right? So, and if you have more than one kid, if you see greatness in one and not the other, then that's a problem. It happens, though. You know, to a degree where your prejudices might feel like another person is more deserving. You know, one kid is more deserving of things than the other kid. Or in some ways, I've seen people try to kind of uniformly treat both kids the same, or multiple kids the same, and it comes off as they want to treat multiple kids the same way, because they want them to be like the kid that they are leaning towards the most. You need to be more like them. So I'm going to do all the things that I do for them for you, because, you know, until you're like them, you know, you're not really as special, right? So, you know, the prejudice goes by. Sometimes it's sometimes people are more fun than other people. So you might like the kid that's a bit more fun than the kid that's a bit more serious. So you might gravitate to good, bad, or indifferent. You're willing to deal with the kid that's fun. You're not that willing to deal with the kid that's, you know, boring, because you have a inner prejudice towards, you know, something that's boring or tedious, right? And that same thing could be looked at with intelligence. Some kids are smart, and you wind up like, that kid think he too smart. So now you have an issue with the kid. You're not going to necessarily parent them the best way, because guess what? You might feel like they're smarter than you, or they were smarter than you at their age. When you were their age, they were light years ahead of you. So you might sabotage them, you know. I've seen too many adults sabotage the youth because they don't want them to succeed. And, you know, that's parenting out of prejudice, like, you know. But, you know, it happens to a degree, because you'll notice it, because a lot of times when people get older, the reflection and the regret sets in, then it's a problem. Then they see what the issue is. Unfortunately, I think sometimes the issue comes up when these kids are grown. That and it's like you kind of knew this stuff when they were kids, but you didn't care. Now that they're grown, and they're not necessarily your responsibility anymore. Now you're willing to admit that you have prejudices. So it gets interesting. Y'all have a good one. We out. Peace.